Okay, start a new drawing template, use our class template, and then use information as we always do. In this case, scale, I know it's going to be 3/4. You can always change. If you had not known, we can come back and change. This is just the information right now. We have information given on the title block. And when we go to the base to bring our first view in, you may not see anything on the screen right now if your file is not open. If it's open, would bring it in. If it's not, then you can browse through and find your file. In this case, I have saved this under the name that we assigned. Now comes in the view that I don't want to. I want to change that to 90-degree rotated, so that would give me the view that I want. In this case would be a front view, I call this one. And the scale, now we need to define a scale to be 3/4. You need to type that because it's the custom scale. And now you can position this in the proper location on the paper. And now we're going to create, instead of just regular projection view, we're going to create sectional view. We are going to look inside rather than looking from outside. To do that, we go to the section tab on the ribbon. And now make sure that you are selecting a point. The first point is critical to be perfectly from the center. You don't want to left click. You want to just track that point as you see the little dotted line, and then left click and the next one, make sure it's perfectly vertical, and then that line must pass through perfectly in the center. Then right click and continue. And now it did so quickly there, so it placed it in the wrong place, so I can move them to proper location. Now this text that comes in automatically in Inventor is a little bit large for this view, so I can highlight them and change the text size to a smaller one, such as 0.125. Okay, now you can position spacing and start adding the center lines and also annotation dimensions. In this case, we have those offset center, and we can add those and continue on just following your guidelines on textbook. And also I have information sheet that you can follow, which is posted under this assignment as a suggestion. Just go ahead, open that assignment sheet and just follow and add this dimension as I'm showing here. A few things you need to do, again, we have been changing in our class, is changing the color for the layer and other settings as required. So it's the same thing. We're going to go to manage and adjust those before we can start adding the dimensions. The first thing I'm going to change is the layer. Under the layer, we're going to change, again, you want to control the color by layer, not just individually. So go to dimension layer and change that one to red. For our classroom, we're using the red one, and other ones magenta for center lines and center marks. After you change those, make sure you save your changes. And once you do that, and it's going to automatically, existing one is going to change. And now the center line doesn't show as a center line. As we always do, we just change that settings, divide by 2, all the settings A and B and D. If this does not still change, we can manually expand them or stretch it to make it line type to display. So go ahead, divide by 2. Normally that dividing by 2 changes most cases. In this case, it's a very small area because only 0.25, so it's still not showing. We can extend the length, and it's not long enough to show, so we can extend a little bit more. It still doesn't show. We can extend a little bit more. Just let's do this one a little bit more and see how it is. See that? No, it's good. Okay, so you can make the top one also to change. Okay, that looks fine for the center lines. Okay, continue adding the dimensions as shows on your assignment sheet. And for this one, again, this is the type of the dimension we do. We don't add these dimensions to the circular view, rather add the rectangle view, because it's the cylinder. Remember the rule of the dimensioning. This is a cylindrical object, and dimension should be on the rectangle view, not on the circular view. So when you're doing that, automatically it doesn't add the diameter for you because we are picking 2 points. In this case, you have to add the symbol. Okay, the symbol, diameter symbol, should be located because it's not linear dimension, is the diameter is still, but we are dimensioning on the rectangle view. That's why picking the 2 points doesn't recognize and adds the length. You can add the symbol automatically. Doesn't do, you can add manually. Okay, now just keep adding exactly the same, continue all the dimensions. Make sure it clearly reads as you're doing these dimensions. We can adjust it afterward to make it readable. That's the whole idea of the communication of the drawings, is to make it clear for the user. And these are something we are doing for manufacturing. Remember, always in the dimensioning, think about the manufacturing process rather than just the dimensioning the geometry. That's one of the basic rules we learned in dimensioning chapter. Okay, now let's go ahead and add. There's one more diameter for this one we need to add. Okay, now I see that it's we can use little modification here to make it dimension move where the text doesn't run to each other, and you don't want to make it too much space between each one, so we can always drag those texts. And to do that, make sure that you're exiting the sketch first by escaping, then coming back into just modifying. Just a little practice on that one to be able to make it as nice as it appears, what we call mechanics of the dimensioning. So make sure it's readable. Okay, adding those outside. We're not trying to clutter it inside, so you add both of them to outside. For 1.5, possible to do inside, but it's preferred not to whenever possible. Okay, now let's go back to dimension. And the holes should be dimensioned on the circular view. So we finished all the cylinders. Now for the holes. This hole, the way we dimension, because they're all the same size, we will say 6x. There are 6 places, or six of the holes, and that's equally spaced. So we have to indicate that. So you don't need to add another angular dimension saying, okay, these are 30 degrees from each other or so forth. So by saying this, this is very clear. Now, how to locate those? What we're going to tell the users where are located. So to dimension that, you don't want to run X and Y dimension. Rather, we run we draw a bolt circle, which we call this construction circle. Okay, this is of course the hole I need to dimension first, 0.75. Now we're going to add location. We don't know still where those holes are located. So we know they're equally spaced. So they're each 1/3 degrees from each other, or 60 degrees rather, from each other there. But we don't know how they are. So we're going to add the center line. For this one, as you see, as you pick the center line, you pick each circle, it's going to give you that option. Where you start, make sure you finish, right click, and create. Well, that's the center line. Now that center line, what we call bolt circle, sometimes they call them BC for abbreviation, that defines the location of the holes. By knowing that's diameter of that is 2.5, and you want to change the format to the way I'm showing you on the handout sheet, you can do that by option, dimension options, and selecting the arrow leader from center, and make sure that you are using the both sides, okay. So that gives you one radius. If you change that single option to uncheck that single diameter line to would be doubled. Okay, that's the way. You can show also just the default, that would be fine, but this is another way to modify that. Okay, now we can just change that 0.75. Doesn't seem like it's the right place, so we can modify that a little bit. As you see, that it's more clear on this side. Okay, so just look through and then make sure that your dimensioning reads correctly and save your work.